is recorded. It will be on the website probably tomorrow, along with the charts from the meeting. If everyone could please go on mute just to keep background noise down. And we will get the package up and going here. We will ask the there we go. So Bishop, if we could ask you to open us with prayer, please.
I've already been praying because my sound wasn't working, but I've got it going again. So the Lord is good. Let us pray. Go before us, O Lord, in all our doings with your gracious favor, and further us with thy continual help. That in all our works begun, continued, and ended in thee, we may praise thy holy name, and finally, by thy mercies, obtain everlasting life through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Great. Well, while we're on a roll with our bishop who has his sound working, then we will carry on with the sound.
So we had a really good clergy day on the 16th of May, where I've been rolling out developments in the lay readers program across the diocese. And the purpose here is to expand the lay readers ministry so that we can build up larger teams of people who are working side by side with priests and deacons around the diocese. So we're working on education for each of the levels and an expansion. We've had a significant number of people show interest in this new program, as well as those who are expressing interest in the diaconate. So very happy about that. We didn't have anyone in the ordination stream other than one person when I came on board. And through this effort, talking to people and recruiting, we're at the last ministry commission meeting. I think we're in conversations with I think 11 separate people in various sorts and conditions of their humanity. Some looking at the diaconate, some looking at the priesthood. Some are seminary trained, some are taking licentiate in theology diplomas. Very pleased with that. And the big thing is to alleviate some of the stress. We will not or do not have the clergy to cover the parishes that we have now. When parishes become vacant, we simply do not have either the sort of inventory of clergy looking to move or come into a parish, or we certainly have not had the numbers coming up behind to sort of take up those who are retiring. So that is a serious piece of the work to make sure that we have continuity. And by acting now, I think we're going to alleviate the larger problem in about 3 to 4 years when we have a series of retirements that in the natural order of things would be scheduled. I'm really focusing most of my work. I'm out in parishes. I'm in Bancroft this weekend. So looking forward to the trip up to Bancroft. And I've been promised a good feed after church, which always is encouraging. I'm somewhere almost every Sunday, and I'm really enjoying myself immensely. I was in Leeds Anglican Ministries a couple of weeks ago. I'm having a great time visiting with folks. And one of the things that I'm beginning to preach on, and you'll be hearing more about, is sort of reconciling with doing your ministry here and now, rather than worrying about the past or complaining about the resources of the past. But we need to do church where we are right now, right here, with the resources we have available, and we have to be creative about it. So that's going to be a major chunk of the structure and the message of Synod. Synod preparations are very well underway. The Synod website goes live, I believe, and we will be in a great position to share our speaker, which is Bishop Rosemary Mallet, and others who will come and speak to us about how we continue to build the communities of hope that our parishes can and will be as we go on. that's a very short version of what I've been up to. You will hear from your various lay readers, or those of you who are already lay readers. You'll know that we've been working on Summer Fruits for Souls at the end of July. We will have Canon Lizette Larson-Miller here to talk about things alongside Lynn Dillabo, one of our own, and Bill Morrow, another of our own, talking about both healthy communities and good scriptural scholarship. And Lynn will be talking about good pastoral care. So I'm really excited about how things are going. Although I often tell people that I'm worried some days that I'm going to meet myself coming the other direction. But it's good to be busy because it certainly makes the time fly. And Alex, back to you, unless you have more for me.
You were going to do an introduction.
Oh, yes. I want to introduce you someone. We released a video yesterday, which was an introduction of Anne Abbock. Anne is visiting us from the Church of England. She is from originally Nigeria, serves and works, has lived in South Africa, and serves and works in England. She's a student at the Birmingham Theological Foundation in the UK, and she's also the international director of the media campaign against human trafficking. And Anne will be with us for 5 weeks doing a placement. She'll be visiting parishes. She's at St. Paul's in Kingston on Sunday, and then Kemptville the following Sunday, and then she's got Sundays all laid out. Anne is an absolute delight. There she is. And over to you. Lovely to have you, Anne, if you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit. Don't forget to unmute.
Thank you very much, Bishop, for the warm welcome I've received ever since I came here, and also every member of the diocese. And I'm looking forward to visiting more churches and meeting with more people, clergy, laity, just anyone that actually we can meet with will be a delight. And I'm learning a lot. And I must say that I'm very grateful to be here for my placement. Thank you very much.
Bishop, normally we would not take questions to the end, but with the bishop has to leave to attend a presentation. So do you want to take any questions at this point while you're still with us?
I'm happy. I've got another 8 minutes that I can take questions during. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them. Well, I'm not being bowled over, so that's a good sign. I've at least been clear.
Great. Well, thank you. As the bishop mentioned, he's got a few more minutes with us, and then he will go off to the other presentation that he's part of, and we will carry on. So for today, we've had the update from the bishop. We'll have an update from David around Safe Church and police record checks and just some summer schedule pieces. And then I'll provide some update on a few areas in finance, including just the capping of 2023, current view of 2024, some of the work we've done around the CMM and the tool, and insurance, just an update there of what the work that's going on. And then we'll move to Q&A at the end. So David.
Thank you, Alex. The three things to talk about. One is express checks, and we found some technical issues in the consent form of uploading that, and they are in the process of being worked out finally, but we are getting them, and people are filling them out by hand as opposed to automatically being done over the computer. So those are turning in. We have about 30 forms that we need to process as quickly as possible, and that will be done tomorrow and get them back. And we are also getting the invoice from Express Check and billing the individual parishes for that to happen. When the parishes get the bill for that, it's $25 plus HST and $29 plus HST for volunteers and for employees. The parish has a couple of options which the parish needs to decide. They can simply credit those as donations to the parish for the cost, and then people can get a tax receipt with their other giving at the end of the year, or they can bill people directly for reimbursement. So the preferred option would be to accept the contribution for that and then to issue the tax receipt, and it becomes part of the person's individual giving at the end of the year. Always, the option is open for people to go with individual police departments for express checks, and we're getting those as well. What the diocese would like is a copy of that we can keep on file, so that if there are any claims that have some liability with them, we can quickly check individuals involved to see if they've had the police records checked and if it's current, and then credit that as well to say back to the insurance company, the people that have been involved in a particular incident have had police records checked. So that is a help for the diocese, and we will keep those in a locked file for that. When people turn in their driver's license and health card or passport or other identification, what we do is we scan that, we send that to Express Check, and then the copies of that are destroyed. So there is no identifying information left in the diocesan office around that. So once it's processed, then all of that will be done. So that's, you send it in, it goes to Express Check, and the original copy that we have sent in terms of scanning is destroyed on the computer. So that's it in terms of Express Check. I did a Safe Church session last night for a parish that I've done before. They're being extraordinarily compliant. There were lots and lots and lots of questions about liability with that, and I am responding to those as best I can with information from the insurance company and all that. The insurance covers the liability for that. If you're involved with another parish, you need at least one person who has a CPIC done to be present, and there is an overall monitoring piece where you need to keep track of individuals, particularly individuals who are under the age of 18. So that's a whole piece around Express Check. And I can answer questions on that later. Summer schedule. As you well know, there are times, June, July, and August, in which the staff and other people are taking holidays, and for some issues, particularly payroll and reimbursement, there is no holiday. We're working on being sure that is covered. When the bishop is gone in August, we will have commissaries to do that, and who will be in touch. And when the bishop is gone in August, I will be here to answer any questions or deal with any circumstances that might arise. Alec is also here, as well as Wayne Varley, depending on the schedule of the time of month. So that's to say that there is coverage. The diocesan office is not closed except for the Friday before Canada Day, which is Friday the 28th of June, and the Friday before the first Monday in August, which is trying to think, would be the 2nd of August. And those days the office is closed and staff are not here. So that's it. Alec, over to you.
Thank you, David. The opportunity if there's any questions there at the end of the call. So let's talk a few things out of the finance side of the world. All right, somebody have a... Okay. So 2023 may be in the rearview mirror for a lot of reasons, but we've now covered one of the major pieces of closure there. We did complete the audit for 2023, led by the audit committee. working through our diocesan auditor, Wilkinson and Company. That was completed. All the work that they do, the final set of statements, which are consolidated financial statements, those were approved by Synod Council, and they are available on the website. You can see the link there, but it's under the resources section, diocesan budget and financial planning, and then under there, the 2023 budget and financial section. So those are available there if you need and you want to get into the detail. Those documents are there. And of course, the T3010, with the end of 2023, all of our churches are on fiscal years, financial years that are calendar years. And the CRA's regulation is that you have to submit your T3010 within 6 months of the end of your financial year. And so for everything in the diocese, that means the end of June. By the way, the diocesan one has been submitted. But in order to maintain your charitable status, and in plain English, what that means is that you can issue a tax receipt, which the donor can use to deduct from their taxes. That you have to file your T3010. If you don't file, usually around August or so, you'll get a warning letter. There'll be a second warning letter later in the year. And then typically in January, the revocation process begins. It is not a pleasant process anymore. It's not a quick, easy fix. And again, once your status is revoked, you lose the ability to be able to issue tax receipts. And that, of course, would have a concern to your donors. Each church, or in some cases parishes within the diocese, have their own charitable numbers, and the filing of that and the maintenance of those is the responsibility of each church. And then finally, on 2023, the parish information returns, I believe that almost all of them are in. I think they're still chasing the last couple. That there is an online tool for that now to submit, and it's an important piece because that's how we stay in contact. So what we look to do is that the distribution list for wardens, for treasurers, for all these pieces they're fed off of the database that those forms create. And again, one of the things that happens is that we find, well, someone's changed, but nobody notified, or someone's email address has changed, went from Hotmail or Outlook to Gmail, and then can't figure why you're not getting reports or not getting invitations or information. So that's important. As part of your the calculation work, you're also required to provide your vestry report. That goes into the archives, so there is a record of all that's gone on in the church, as well as the financial data. Just a quick update on quarter one. We report to council on the operating results, and this one was done. Just provide a quick overview. So we look at the quarter one, which is January to March, the actual, what the budget was. We then do a forecast for the balance of the year. We take the 3 months that we've got in, and then we look at the budget and then whatever other changes we know about, and we produce what's called the April forecast. So that's the best view as to how the year is going to turn out. So that's the third column there, and then the final column is what the full year budget as approved was. So as you can see, we are pretty much tracking to budget. in terms of the first quarter, and also in terms of what we're looking like for the end of the year. If you've got glasses on, then this just provides the next layer of detail amongst the sections. This is, of course, available on the website, but each of these just provides where the sections are. But as you can see, the variances for the year aren't looking significantly different at this point. And of course, one of the things that everyone's most concerned with in terms of the budget and the deficit. So for 2023 at the operating level was $125,000 deficit. The budget for this year brought that down to just under 51,000. Current forecast is it'll be about 42,000. There's work going on pretty much every day around managing costs and trying to drive income. But at this point, we are still viewing that while we want to reduce that deficit, there's still the forecast is there's one in place. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about CMM. Common mission and ministry is what each church contributes to the diocesan budget. And that's a number of things. One of the pieces is that it's the church's financial contribution to the whole diocese. And of course, the diocese is basically all of the churches that are in it. The diocese is at the heart of Anglican structure, is the central unit for the Anglican Church, and the churches form part of the diocese. The diocese then also provides income upwards to the provincial synod, ecclesiastical province of Ontario, and to the general synod at the national level that funds ministry and other work that's done at those two levels. In our case, it's about CMM represents about roughly 3/4 of the income in the 2024 budget, and that's what pays for the work of ministry, both inward and outward. The thing is, it is called different things in different dioceses. We use the term CMM. Some use the term apportionment. Some use the term fair share. But every diocese basically calculates on an income-based formula. And that basically says that the church pays proportional to their income, which means that churches with lower income pay less than the churches proportionally with larger income. CMM's calculated by basically taking the total income for the church and then deducting things that are designated as exempt. That produces what's referred to as assessable income, which is then multiplied by the approved rate. I get all kinds of questions about CMM rate. The CMM rate has not changed in at least for the 13, 14 years that I've been involved with the finance committee and the office. That rate has not changed. At one time, in terms of what the diocesan rate is, at one time, benefits for clergy were paid by a 5% assessment, which approximated the cost of the benefits. And as you know, a number of years ago, we shifted to an actual cost basis. So that causes a little confusion, but the CMM rate has not changed. It has been for many years, 20%, and continues to be. And of course, what's payable in a year is based upon the assessable income from 2 years prior. So for 2024, it's based on 2022 income. Just a quick, what some of the typical designated exempt things are. Funds which are designated and used for capital expenditures. Funds that are pass-throughs, the money the church takes in that is sent to another like PWRDF. Funds, whoops. Oh, we lost. Somebody took control. Not sure where that happened. Let me put that back. Sure quite what happened. Just a second. Hey, figure out where the control went. David, I think somehow you took control. And there. Let me get backed up, get the charts back up. There we go. Gotcha. Of course it is.
There you go. All right.
Okay. So typically, designated pass-throughs, funds which are put into reserves, which are the diocesan investment fund, or with agreement in an external investment fund. And again, the note there being that income generated is that again, income generated, as long as it stays in that investment fund, is not accessible at that time. When funds are removed from the fund, from and used for operating purposes, those funds are then accessible. And we're seeing churches right now withdrawing funds to fund operational deficits. That money which comes out will then be part of your income for CMM purposes in 2026. And then the other question that often comes, a number of churches are running things like thrift stores, and money that is generated there that stays within that mission or ministry or outreach is not accessible. If it rolls back to parish operations, it then becomes accessible. And then finally, where grants are received for mission or outreach, and typical there would be reach and stretch grants, they are not accessible. A quick question on what is capital. So income for capital that is used for capital purposes or put into a fund designated for capital is not accessible. Capital is where you're doing either a new building or a new structure alteration for something, or replacing an item that has a life of more than 5 years at a cost of over $2,000. And those are, we will often get into discussions in terms of what some of those specifically mean, but that really is the guidelines on what is capital. Normal building maintenance, repair, and preventative work is not capital. That's an operational expense. So in the past, we've had, now if you go back, and I've been asked this before, why did it get called a green sheet? And we did find in the archives, and I think it may actually have been from the 1950s, where there was a big sheet, a pad of sheets that was a calculation tool. And the color of the paper was green. And so that seems to have stuck, but we know them as green sheets. There has for many years been an Excel spreadsheet that is used. Some treasurers are able to use it. It does require, of course, that you have Excel, and then some aren't comfortable with the Excel and some of the complexities. So we have been working on an alternative tool. We did a fair bit of work in the last couple of years, and it's been some work that summer interns have helped with. We really wanted to take a step, not to change how it's calculated, because we're not changing any of that. None of the rules of inclusion or the rates are changing. It's about providing something that's a little simpler to use and easier to understand. And so what we've done is taken what we refer to as a narrative approach. And that is so that rather than just going to a spreadsheet and filling in the boxes and then trying to work it all through, this tool will basically walk you through a set of questions, a set of like a script, and you'll input against it. And we have been very blessed with the summer intern we have, and I believe Anika's on the call. This is some of her handiwork. And so what I've got is a short demo this is not a training piece. This is merely like a trailer for a movie to give you a feel for how this goes. So let me So that's just a quick sort of teaser and demo for how this is going to work. We will be, as was mentioned in there, there is help built into the tool by, for example, hovering to get definitions on what something means. There's also a document that will provide those explanations and more. And then what we're going to be doing is holding a session, which we're actually going to try using more online training, which will let you kind of at your own pace work through how to use the tool. And that will happen over the next couple of months. So from one hot topic to another, I think it's safe to say that there's not many discussions with churches these days, with wardens anyway, if not the clergy, where insurance doesn't come up. And we have insurance basically to protect financially from the hardship, whether it's a small one or a major one, that when something happens to property or someone is injured or harmed, that while they're in our care, either on the premises or in programs activities, basically our insurance protects us from that financial damage. As everybody knows, but just for mentioning, our current providers, I mean, ecclesiastical is the bulk of the insurance. There's a small slice of it that comes through Lloyd's of London because they move things through, and the broker is Aon. So all of these companies are large global players. Ecclesiastical, of course, is one of the few left that will insure places of and organizations of faith. And that is one of the challenges. There were several dioceses, including, for example, the Diocese of Huron had been with Aviva. And Aviva advised them a couple of years ago they won't cover churches anymore. And they had to go and they ended up with Ecclesiastical. Ecclesiastical is owned at the baseline by the Church of England, by a trust. And so they have a different perspective on risk. And again, our churches represent risk in a number of ways because many of our buildings, I mean, I'm not aware of any that have complete fire alarm systems, burglar alarm systems, fire prevention systems, like sprinklers, all of those kinds of things. We have pieces of those, but not that kind of protection. All of our buildings are somewhat aged, and that presents challenges. We have issues with some cases where being out remotely, fire protection is a challenge. We still have some churches that do not have water on property. And so again, the volunteer fire department, all of those things present risk. I think everyone is aware of the very sad last week in the Diocese of Toronto, St. Anne's, which is a large and very unique building. But it also had all of the dome in there was all frescoes, and they were painted by the group of 7. So the cost of it, you can't replace it. As far as I know, the group of 7 is not painting anymore. You can't replace that. And you're now into another whole set of pieces around the loss that's there. But that very much, and they're not looking at arson, not clear on cause yet, but that one will be a major challenge as we work through the next year. As we all know, the last 2 years, we've seen significant increases. They've come in a couple of ways. Some of it is due to inflation in the rate. Some of it is due to getting the cost base readjusted for replacement cost. And so in some cases, we've had double whammies. We did stage that over 2 years in terms of the replacement cost for the biggest of them. But basically in 2024, that caught up. So the increases have been large, no question. And we have a good understanding of the strain that places on churches in terms of the financial load. The insurance industry, we know, continues to evolve and adjust. They're adjusting to the world of inflation, and that causes, with interest rates, different issues. It causes replacement costs to go up. There's been inflation in lawsuit and results there, where the courts have increased. So those all net, when losses occur, they've gone up. When you hear about a hurricane going through and doing $10 billion of damage, that may be in Asia or it may be in the Caribbean, but it causes ripples through the insurance marketplace. And that causes things that will eventually ripple down to us. We've seen the insurance industry getting more focused around where risk sits. I just was with a church last week and met with their parish council. Who knew that some of our towns and villages and cities sit in earthquake zones? And that if you look at where the fault lines and where the seismic rate, where all of that sits on the maps, they now go in and assess an additional premium. That can be well over $1,000 on an annual basis because of the risk of an earthquake. Floods. If you sit in a floodplain, there is a additional premium for that. Wildfires, less so in Ontario, but out west, they're being hit with some hard because of the wildfires that have gone through. So there's a range of specials that have now become part of the premium structures. We see higher loss now, unfortunately, with vandalism, arson, some of it being related to protests. And whenever we have a residential school, there's additional finding of graves that often results in vandalism. And then there's difficulty in assessing the broad liability coverage, just how much for PSA, which is physical and sexual abuse, cybercrime, and all those things. And then finally, the thing they look at with us is what our loss history is. And whether that's a major loss or whether that's a small one, that's a factor. So all of that tells us we're not done with significant increases. And that's really the focus of some of the work we've been doing at both the diocesan level, where we're working with aeon and ecclesiastical around things. Different dioceses, but by the way, use different levels of deductibles. Some dioceses have raised their deductibles significantly. What that does is you share the loss. So, for example, if we raised our deductibles to say $50,000 on a loss, that would reduce somewhat the premium. However, it says that on a lot of these typical for us, where there's been a break-in or there's been shingle damage or there's been a basement flood, a lot of those are under 50K. And that says that we would have to bear those losses entirely ourselves. So there's that approach. We are working our way with a discussion on what's called functional replacement versus replacement cost. And so that's really saying if there was a loss of the church, would we replace that large building to the same level, or would we do something different? That'd be a multi-purpose, smaller footprint, different construction, but that would have a different cost to it. One of the challenges there is what happens when there's a partial loss. We all think about when there's a full loss, but what happens if there's a fire and it damages part of the church, or a tree falls through the roof and it takes part of the roof out, but the building is not a write-off, and now your coverage is only to a different cap or is shared. So we're working that through. We're working that through with aeon and ecclesiastical. We have another project underway looking at what the alternatives would be. Basically, there's with aeon and ecclesiastical is where the bulk sits. We are exploring if there's players in the United States that would consider going through the regulatory steps to take on insurance in Canada. Insurance is a regulated business. Can't just pop up and decide you're starting an insurance company. It is all very much regulatory by province. At the provincial level, we have started a working group. And in fact, I was at a meeting in Toronto this week on that front. And there we're looking at some of the same things, but also looking at how we can create pools and other models of self-insurance. And so, and again, self-insurance always sounds attractive, and that's fine, because in a year where you don't have a claim, you can look at your insurance and say, well, I bought protection, but I didn't need it. But if you're into a or self-insurance, you share that with. So if you're only 50% insured and you have a $2 million loss, you're out $1 million. If you get something that's a little more catastrophic, you can only think about if we had a large lawsuit that generated, say, a $5 million liability. That would, in most cases, put a church out of financial viability and would feed back at the diocesan level, and we would have a significant issue. So how you balance large losses in a co-insurance model, but we are talking about, can we create a model where we would pool across the dioceses in the province, there are 7, and look at, can we balance the risk and the impact and create cost models that would look different. But just for clarity, I'm not seeing that there's anywhere where we're going to go down. The work we are doing is trying to put control and limits on the future increases. And so that's an important point to make. When I come in to the office originally, if I recall, our insurance bill for the diocese was around $200,000 for all of the churches. This year, it was just about $600K. So it has tripled. And based on what I've described previously, my outlook is that it's unlikely to go down. And so what we're trying to work here is to limit future impacts. So on that cheery note, our next meeting, as you know, we have gone to a quarterly rhythm with this, the third quarter of the last of each month of each quarter. So that's what June is. So the next meeting would be on the third Thursday of September, and we would have that again at 2 p.m. And of course, that meeting would be online. And so we will now open up to questions. We have several ways you can ask a question. One is to put your hand up, and we have a few people with their hand up already.
Sure. Well, fine.
And
Read it.
we will, secondly, as you can also come in and do so, by the chat session and ask a question there.
This is ridiculous.
And we'll try that for you. So I've got hands up. Let me just jump over. So number 1 on the hand up would be the Venerable Bill Clark.
Yeah, good afternoon, Alex and everybody. You'd mentioned the audit sort of being one of the last bits of work from 2023.
Yeah, I know, but now it's a yellow
And
square around. I've got your hand up.
There is another piece of work from 2023 that is still before us. And people in this meeting may recall that at our synod, we passed a motion to support the Sisters of St. John the Divine Mother House by raising $30,000 outside of the diocesan budget. Just a little bit of a heads up. Everyone, well, certainly all the delegates, lay and clergy, will be receiving a beautifully written letter. I know it's beautifully written because I helped write it. Soliciting support, basically asking for funds, either from yourselves individually, but encouraging parishes to make contributions towards that $30,000 goal. I believe it's Leeds Rear has already made a $1,000 donation. So we're on our way, but I hope that folks can give it some thought. I know it's summertime, things are kind of winding down, but if a small project or two could be undertaken by every congregation in the diocese, we could meet this obligation well before the end of the year. So you'll get a letter shortly, electronically, physically. Don't worry, I'm not going to come door to door unless the money doesn't come in. Then we'll see. Okay, thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can reach out to myself or to Sylvia Docking. That's it, Alex, for me.
Thanks, Bill. And I will highlight for those that are provincial synod delegates, Sister Connie, who of course was at our synod, and very clearly recalls the commitment that this diocesan synod made. Sister Connie will be at our provincial synod, and I have a funny hunch that rather than Bill Clark knocking on doors, Sister Connie may be knocking on diocesan doors. So stay tuned.
Well, I want to make sure that the former Dogan in me wants to make sure that the nuns are very happy when I meet them at provincial synod.
Well, and Sister Connie is much better with a smile. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Bill. That is an important piece. And again, follow on from synod. Eric Friesen.
Thanks, Alex. I have a question about insurance. It's a question that comes from our executive. Because the premiums are hitting us pretty hard and at St. George's, and just wondering, is it possible to reduce some of our coverage in order to reduce our annual premium?
Not without reducing, and again, within the piece, and I think this one's back previously, but when they did the reassessment, that's what doubled the cathedral's premium. And unless we go into a co-insurance model, then there is no flexibility there.
I wasn't a warden at the time, but I gathered that just a couple of years ago, we were offered the option to raise the amount of coverage, and we did. We wouldn't have had to. So I'm just wondering if we could go back to the former.
You can't. Number one, you can't. And the choice then was, if you did not take the full appraised cost, say you went, because it basically doubled. So for the sake of argument, I'll say that it's 50%. Then any claim you have. So, and we, typical claim with a roof for $30,000, they would only pay out half on everything and related to property. And so the wardens at that time made the decision that was not a risk they wanted to take.
Okay, good. Well, that answers my question.
Yep.
Thanks, Al.
I'm happy to have a discussion, Eric, and as well as we look at some of the specifics, and of course the cathedral is a very unique one because of the large cost. But again, part of the strength of where we are, despite some of the history in our cathedral, the liability for every church is the same. The liability coverage, the premium, and the coverage are exactly the same. Everybody pays about $1,600-1,700. That is one of the advantages of strength of numbers.
Right. I certainly understand the liability part. It's just, and I guess everybody faces this. I mean, if this cathedral were to burn down, we could never replace it with the money we'd get, so.
Yeah. And so the model of functional replacement says rather than replacement cost, that what you do is you say, we wouldn't replace it, we couldn't replace it, it wouldn't make sense. And pretty most churches say, we wouldn't rebuild this, we would do something different. So let's say that and I won't say the cathedral, but we would say, look, for an average church, instead of this Gothic structure that's beautiful in stone, we might build a slab on grade that's a multi-purpose building that can be used for a variety of things with a different footprint and a different construction cost. And but what you have to do to get the insurer to agree to that, you actually have to get a set of plans, architect drawings, that have to then, and you have to go and get a quote from 3 different contractors to say that set of plans is what the church agrees to. Here's 3 sets of quotes to say that would cost $2 million. And then you have to update it every couple of years. So we're trying to work with them because that's, that's very difficult to manage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
that
can
is the discussion around that, to me, is one of the key ways we would be able to reduce.
Right. Okay, good. Well, good work on that, and good luck with working something on the provincial level, because this is a really serious challenge to us.
It is indeed, and I can tell you, having been in the meeting with all the dioceses, 7 dioceses present, I know all of you folks feel that the pain has, and every diocese has the same sets of issues.
Yeah.
Churches, this is not unique to our diocese.
No, I understand. Okay, thank you, Alex. You're welcome. That's helpful. Yeah.
So, George Vale, I got your hand up next.
Hi, Alex. Thank you very much. Thank you to us for everything you're doing to help us with the insurance. My first question, this has nothing to do with insurance. My first question is about investments. If we at Blue Church Cemetery have investments, are we allowed to dip into them to do upgrading work at the cemetery, like do work on the Blue Church, or possibly put in a crematorium?
So, crematorium or columbarium?
Columbarium.
Columbarium, excuse me.
Okay, sorry, because crematorium be another piece of, so,
Yeah.
So, and in fact, there's 2 different sets of funds for cemeteries. The care and maintenance funds, those are regulatory controlled. And in fact, and those are because under the bereavement authority, and those are what they're looking for. Every time a interment rights are sold, you have to put 40% or a minimum of, for typically $290 these days, that has to go into that care and maintenance fund. That is a trust fund. And thou shalt not under any circumstance but one spend capital out of those care and maintenance funds. The only thing you can do is, with the permission of the BAO, and that's not easy, is to borrow money against it to expand the cemetery. But that's the only piece. If the cemetery, however, has funds that have been donated to it, those aren't in the regulatory controlled fund. And those, as long as the wishes of the donor are respected, because some people will donate money and it's only for the care of their family monument. But if you've got general investments, those are accessible. Those are accessible for something like a columbarium. The final thing is that there is funding available with the capital project funding out of the diocese for capital loans. So a church could borrow money to put a columbarium in and then pay it back over up to 10 years.
Okay, good enough. But okay, I understand what you mean now. Good. Okay, thank you very much for that.
So everybody's aware, we just had yesterday, Joyce and I spent half a day with the bereavement authority. They came to our office and did an inspection of the pooled fund that we have in the care and maintenance funds. And so that fund, we have about $1.5 million in that fund. Those are regulatory controlled. So the regulator visited us yesterday with their compliance officer and a couple of his staff to ensure that we are handling the fund correctly and that it's managed and cared for correctly. So they take this extremely seriously.
Okay, I have another question then, Alex. It's well, and it has to do with the Blue Church. just what you were talking about with the VAO there, our treasurer's got some things he has to fill out on it. Now in there, I believe it says that people believe that you don't pay taxes in the cemetery. Well, maybe you don't, but you pay in lieu of. But in my understanding is, though, if you actually have anything in that cemetery, like if you were running a business, like if you were selling monuments yourself, or like it says, if you were selling caskets or something like that, then you would have to pay actually directly to Impact. But there's a portion in that thing that Bert has to fill out where it involves Impact, and he phoned Impact. I asked where he phoned. He said it was Toronto. Bert's not able to be here today to ask the question himself because he's in Blue Church as we speak. They're preparing for the interment for tomorrow for a funeral. Anyway, he wanted to know, he asked them some questions, and they said that they would give him no information, that he had to put in who actually owned this cemetery. Well, he said his idea was it was Anglican Church of Canada and the Diocese of Ontario out of Kingston, and they're affiliated with St. John's Anglican Church in Prescott, and they told him that meant nothing to them. So his question for me was, who actually is the authority and the owner of the Blue Church Cemetery?
So I can take specifics, George, and we can go offline with that. But just for clarity, right? The all diocesan churches and property, regardless of what it says on the deed, because the deed may say who the first incumbent was back in 1872. It may say the Church Society of the Diocese of Toronto. It may say whatever. But if they all are held by the diocese, and that's where it comes back to. That's been supported in court. And when Anik broke away, there was a big court fight over it, which they lost. So that the property is in the name of the diocese, regardless of what the deed says. MPAC is always an interesting discussion. So I think we can have a side conversation, George, to see how do we help you there. But there should not be assessment on a cemetery.
Okay, thank you very, very much for that. I'll tell Bert that, and I'll tell him to email you at a time he could have that conversation with you.
Yep, happy to.
Okay, thank you. Now this next question is for David Seltzer. If David's still available, I see he is. David, thank you for being with us last night down at St. Paul's. That was a very good session and a lot of good questions and a lot of good answers. Well, all the answers were good from you. My question is, and we spoke last night, but just to reconfirm, how often, number one, how often should a person have that screening in faith done?
So are you talking about the police check or the screening in faith training?
Well, I'll ask you the screening in faith first and then give me the police check.
Okay, so my suggestion would be once every 5 or so years. The information is pretty basic, and it does vary somewhat by it being updated, but not much. So I would say that's it, particularly for clergy and others who are in new churches. It's always good to get a refresher course, which is what I basically did last night. We didn't go through the whole thing around that. For the police check, the CPIC, the recommendation is once every 3 years or so.
Okay, because I heard that the police check was supposed to be every year.
Nope, once every 3 years or so. We've just checked with the insurance company, and they are looking at least, they're looking at once every 3 years, and I would add the word or so. So if you're supposed to have it again in 2000, in 27 and you forget that year, you can do it in 2028. And then the diocese will send you a reminder.
Okay. Now, is the police check any different for, like, say, a volunteer? Like how often the volunteer would have to get it done, or say the clergy themselves, or the lay readers, or the wardens? Is there any difference in time?
Not really, because we are all doing ministry in our own places. Clergy, sometimes more so than lay people, but a lot of lay people do a whole lot of ministry. So once every 3 years is to just keep that current, and the police check is checking only at the time that it's checked. So if the day after you have a check, you got arrested for something, who knows what, not parking tickets, that will then show from then on, but not at the time that you had it done if you had done it the day before.
Okay.
We recommend for clergy in new positions that they have their police check again, so that their wardens will also know that it's current.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, David, for that. I appreciate that very much. Thanks a lot.
Good.
That's all for me.
Thanks,
Well, good.
George.
Thank you.
Got a question in the chat. If we rent equipment from an outside source, is it covered under our insurance policy? The equipment is used off-site, is it covered? And people that aren't part of the church that might use it, is it covered? So if you have rented or leased equipment, usually, particularly things like printers, more expensive printers, copiers, the leasor will request that they be added to the actual policy, and that's reasonably straightforward to do. And then they are listed specifically. But if whether it's rented or owned, it's a church piece of equipment, and therefore it would be covered, particularly as long as it's something relating to the church, right? If it's not a church function or anything you could track back, that might get into an argument. But in general, rented equipment is covered. I'm just going back to hands for a moment. Sorry, I got to dance back and forth here. Brad O'Neill had a question.
Hi, Alex. It's Brad O'Neill, Rector's Warden at St. Lawrence Anglican Church in Brockville. I'm going to be very quick. I have about 5 minutes here. So 2 quick questions. One for David Seltzer, who's already on the line, or who's come to talking about CPICs and CBCs. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about myself here, but quite often we will get parishioners, maybe new parishioners who are maybe vulnerable in some ways, have corrected some behavior from the past, maybe had a DUI when they were 18, maybe smoked some pot when they were 18, and they, of course, are getting a criminal background check. So it would come back with something on there. So my question is there something in the policies and procedures about some sort of adjudication process for those, or is that up to the diocese and the incumbent to make that determination?
Good. Thank you. That was a question we talked about last night in Cardinal. There are people who, for various reasons, have a record on that, and it's either for DUI. Sometimes people are arrested at a protest and other kinds of stuff around that. So it's a matter of talking with the wardens. If it comes back, it's either negative or positive. So that's exactly it. It will stay on your record now until you die or have it removed by court, which is a very lengthy and difficult, and I will also add costly procedure to do. If you live in Maryland and you were arrested for marijuana, that's now pardoned. So that's the one piece of good news. Along with 375,000 other people. But what you would do would be to have the conversation with the wardens, notify the diocese, which would be either me or the bishop, and explain the circumstances around that. And the wardens with the diocese can do that internal pardoning. And
Great, perfect.
particularly that long Saturday night in which you suddenly got arrested and you didn't think you had been drinking much, but they did, and you were 18, then, and that was 50 years ago, and you haven't had a touch to drink, a drop to drink since then, or you're not ever arrested again, that can easily be reduced.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And I do have a second question for you, Alex. It's just around capital projects and whether this would be considered capital or not. I know that within the next year, we're going to be looking at accessibility quite a bit. And you may well know that our church has done quite a bit with accessibility. So those accessibility projects, large accessibility projects, would be considered capital projects. Is that correct?
That is correct. Those would be a large, whether it's a major alteration to the building, which, but I know the work you're looking at doing, and typically larger cost as well. Yep, that's not a maintenance project. That's a capital improvement.
And of course, that wouldn't hit our CMM until 2 years from now, right?
It won't hit those funds raised for example, that accessibility project wouldn't be accessible at any point.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for everything.
You're welcome. Next hand up is Trish Miller.
Thanks very much, Alex. Questions are for you for financial and insurance. One, we still haven't got the insurance package for the parish of Kittley, St. Paul's, Nublis. We've gotten Roslyn and we've gotten Lynn, and we've been asking, but I'm just wondering, maybe some other parish has it and can forward it to us. And I don't want to get interest charged because we haven't had the invoice. And sort of hand in hand with that is we're missing for the parish of Lansdowne-Rear some investment statements. We've gotten, like we might have gotten the interest payment, but we're missing the actual statements. And most concerning about that is we did a withdrawal of $15,000 from one of those investments, and it wasn't taken off when we received the next quarterly investment statement. I don't know how long the lag time. We took the money out in February, so the end of the quarter was the end of March. I don't know if it shows up in arrears or if it, I don't know.
They should, we'd have to look at the specifics. Joyce is on the line, so she can follow them through, but we would, normally, and usually when the issue of statements not going is usually related to email addresses.
This is not a case of the email address because we get some, but not others. So
but each fund you have has an individual email address on it.
And these are new funds which would have the new email addresses. We've received them in the past, just not this time. So I don't know what's changed.
And neither do I, but if you haven't already sent Joyce the specifics, then we can follow it through.
Maybe you and I can talk offline afterwards, and we can make an appointment to come and have a visit into Kingston to go over some of the specifics.
Sure.
Okay.
As far as the insurance one goes, that one I'm confused by, but I will go and take a look.
Yeah, Parish of Kittley.
Okay, let me just check the chat quickly. Oh, sounds like I didn't answer the question fully. So if you have equipment and it is the church-owned equipment and it's permanently located somewhere else, you're not going to be covered. If, however, someone is taking, and I think you're specifically talking probably about musical equipment, if someone takes that equipment, uses it for a performance or some other event, and then brings it back, then that is covered. Whether it is a church asset, even though it's a rented asset, And, it's when you're out, if it's permanently located somewhere else, then that would be an issue. Hope that clarifies. George, did you have another question, or is that a hangover hand?
I haven't had a hangover in about 20 years.
Okay. Well, I meant that the hand was hanging over from your previous question.
No, it's not, Alex. Thanks. I got another question. In this area here, it's virtually impossible to get anybody to dig interments for you anymore, unless cremations, and then we have our own person that digs them. You dig them by hand, but by a machine, because the insurance has got so high that the 2 or 3 around here that were doing it actually end up selling their equipment. And the reason being, like one guy that we had doing ours did it all the time, but I think one year there we had the number of interments we had at Blue Church, 90% of them were cremations, so therefore he wasn't required. So not a lot of money coming in for them. But anyway, my question is, we have a gentleman, and he's a professional on a backhoe, and he works for a gentleman that landscaping, and he's able to borrow it to do somewhere, and he's already dug 2 for us. He does a real professional job at digging, filling back in, making sure everything's leveled up, planting some grass seed if you want them. But he does not have, it's not like a business, it's not his own business, so he doesn't have covered insurance. What would happen if he was digging there and he happened to, swing the boom and it happened to hit a headstone nearby and broke it? Would the Blue Church Cemetery's insurance cover that?
Well, what there would be is a heck of a scrap between his personal insurance company and the cemeteries and ecclesiastical, because they would say you're responsible for your own damage, and ultimately, though, the cemetery would be protected, but his insurance would come first.
Okay, now what do you mean by his personal insurance?
Well, he must have, like on that backhoe, he must have insurance, or he must have insurance for liability himself. Like our homeowners, your homeowner's insurance has liability coverage.
Okay, because he'd have no insurance. Like the backhoe belongs to him, not entirely. It belongs to the gentleman he works for, but he does extra work for this gentleman and that owns the business, and the guy lets him borrow it to come and do some work with. So there'd be no insurance as far as from the person that we're having doing the digging. There'd be no insurance on the machine. It would just then have to be his own liability insurance, would it?
That would, if there's no insurance on the backhoe, I would say yes, that's the case. And it would, the cemetery's policy will pick up, but they're going to look at the individual first.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for that, Alex.
And let me take one more crack at the question on rented equipment, because it seems I'm still not being clear enough. So if the question being if people outside of the church are using rented equipment outside of the church, and again, the line there is going to be, if it is a church program, right, that these people are part of, and then that equipment is covered. If somebody has just borrowed it and it has nothing to do with the church other than just borrowing the equipment, the insurer is going to look at that and say that's not our liability. The church is insured. The church, and that's why if your youth group or your euchre group or anything else goes somewhere on a trip and visits somewhere, there is coverage during that because it's a church activity. But if it's not a church activity, then the insurer for anything, whether it was a piece of rented equipment or something, someone fell, or whether there was, abuse or whatever, they would step back from that. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's and you get into a series of specifics, but it's insured because it's a church program. John Schreiner, got a question?
Yeah, Alex, I just thought you had a good answer to my question regarding the green sheet and how the web page aligns with the old Excel sheet. And perhaps others would like to hear the answer to that.
Sure. Well, actually, what I will do is Anika's on the call, and she answered your question, not me. So there she is. I'll let her. You're on mute right now, but I will ask you to provide the answer you gave on the chat.
Hi, everyone. Basically, what I was saying was that some of the components of the new green sheet will be similar to the old one, but there will be a couple or a lot of new components as well on the tool. One thing we'll do before people actually start using the green sheet is there will be lots of resources provided to show everyone how the new green sheet is used. So there will be videos, there will be a manual. So and then I think something Alex had mentioned before is that there will also be some sort of maybe online like lesson that will get people together to just like run through the new tool. So there will be plenty of resources involved in trying to get people on board and to really understand how the new tool works.
Thank you. And again, one of the offshoots of this is we're also preparing the option to do some parish bookkeeping, and that's some of the work that falls as part of this. And that'll also be saying to churches, if you want to make your green sheet calculation a little easier, here's some suggestions on your financial statements and how you might report things. So that's one of the other pieces that'll come with that. And I see Andrew hand up.
Yeah, hello, this is Andrew, People's Warden in Bath.
Hi, Andrew.
And I've got a question about insurance.
Sure.
And I appreciated your point about the partial insurance, that if we were to reduce our coverage to something like 50% or 75%, that could be problematic if you get a partial loss, because then, you've got a half a roof, which you can't afford to replace. But we are kind of shocked by our insurance bill this year, and we'd like to go that route. But then you described this having to get 3 quotes and all the rest of it, drawings, and that's quite laborious, I think. But maybe it's worth doing. And would it be possible to have something where you're fully insured for a partial loss, but up to the limit of your new rebuild cost, so that you don't get the full whack of the insurance? That's
part of the construct we're working. And that's why this takes some work to do. The other thing is, I don't think it makes sense for individual churches to go and try and get, the first thing you got to do is get a set of plans, and that can cost a fair bit of money. And then there's the cost. Then there's the cost behind that. So I'm trying to look at that and say we can come up with a set of standard plans. It's a little bit like when you go to a subdivision and you look at the houses that are available, and they have a set of plans. So we'd have a library you could pick from that would then hopefully leave that cost. And we want to do that provincially. So we've got the cost of developing those. We still have to get local quotes done, but that's a little bit different. And that's the effort. The second thing is negotiating with the insurer around what is a partial loss versus total loss. And so right now we don't have that flexibility, but we are trying to work with ecclesiastical to get that put in place.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. And that's a really good idea to get the standard set of plans, I think.
Yep. And we want to do them provincially so that we share that cost, and then the leverage with the insurer is common because it's 7 dioceses and a few thousand churches. Okay, looks like I'm out of hands. There was a question asked about mandating equipment. Would that reduce premiums? And the answer is not significantly. There has been a program that they run where you can get us for the first year after you do a new roof or a plumbing rework, you can get a slight reduction, but they at this point don't offer us anything if we come back and said the church is invested in a sprinkler system. That at this point they don't provide that credit or discount for that. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. Again, I think probably when we go to this once a quarter, we're probably ending up at probably closer to an hour and a half, but that's okay because it's every 3 months. And you've seen the one where we'll be up again in September. And
I like it every month.
we'll look forward to following through. So in the absence of the bishop, let me go back to our previous bishop who would say at this point, why don't we try and break the internet and we'll say the grace together. The grace of our Lord
Jesus Christ,
and the love
Of God,
God,
and the fellowship
and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all.
evermore. Amen. Thank you Alex, I kind of am going to miss this here every month. I like getting together and saying hi to you all. But anyway, good job by everybody. Have a good day. Stay cool.
We'll talk in September.
If not before.
Thanks.